Hello and welcome to a conversation about the next era of the Cooperative Program. My name is Matt Tullos, and I am just so excited to have Chris Forbes in the house. How are you doing, Chris?
I'm doing well. I'm really excited about this book that just finished with the Future Commission, and looking forward to people having the opportunity to read it.
Well, Chris, you've been around the SBC for a long time. I think probably both of us have been around about the exact same amount of time, although you've been kind of a worldwide traveler, a part of IMB and several other entities within the Southern Baptist Convention. And so I just wanted to start out to ask you what your story is and how this book come about.
Well, sure. Yeah, I've been in the SBC in various capacities for about 35 years. I was a missionary in Spain. I served in the Richmond office of the International Mission Board. I've also worked through the North American Mission Board as a dually funded missionary to Oklahoma, and then on staff of Oklahoma Baptists. And have, as a consultant, I've done continual projects with either IMB, NAM, Oklahoma Baptist, Executive Committee, other entities, and just been a pleasure to serve and just to get a kind of a peek at the front lines of where the CP is really making an impact.
Right. Now, you say that this book is not a critique. Could you explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, all through my career, I've been intrigued by the Cooperative Program. I've heard various leaders that I've worked with say, hey, the Cooperative Program, it may not exist in the same form in 10 years from now. Or, I heard that, for 35 years, I've heard that.
Right.
But I was starting to wonder, looking around, if maybe we're there where there is some possibilities. And I really wanted to explore what the future of the Cooperative Program is, and not necessarily get into the weeds of the short-term issues and debates, but look at the long term. And so really, I'm not focusing in on the conversation today, but kind of jettisoning ahead and imagining what the future of the Cooperative Program might be in the year 2050.
So this book, how could it be used? Is it only for denominational leaders?
Well, I think uh, I've always been working at the denominational level, so it has a lot of uses in that, and I kind of learned to serve leaders. I'm not like a power player in the SBC
Right.
stretch. I'm just a regular denominational worker who's worked in this and in being intrigued about it. But I wanted it to be something that would be useful also to the local church. And what I have tried to apply here is a different approach to strategic planning that maybe people are they may not be used to it,
Right.
but it's a kind of discipline, way of thinking called strategic foresight or futures thinking. And I've observed SBC leaders and pastors and others kind of function on kind of like three levels of how they view the future. One is they might just try to predict it based on,
Right.
insider information or something like that. Or another, they might extrapolate information they had, data they have, like if, Sunday school attendance is this, it might be this next year, or, something like that. Or like, how our baptisms are moving in the state, if we keep going in this direction, this will how it will be. But often those kind of extrapolations, those kind of predictions, the probabilities, assume that the variables of today are the same as tomorrow. And so it's not very reliable for the long term. And another thing I've experienced, and you probably are familiar with this too, is like the whole idea of like, we set a really awesome goal, like
Right.
a really, really inspiring goal. Like we're going to reach everybody by 2000, or, we're going to reach everybody by 2020, or, 2025, or, next, what will it be? 2030, 2050, whatever.
It's a really small window, in other words.
Yeah. And, well, even if we push it out, but we don't necessarily have plans to accommodate what if things change. Like the variables, are larger as the further you push out. So, like, for bold mission thrust, we didn't anticipate Y2K interrupting that.
Right.
Or Vision 2020, when it was first announced, we didn't anticipate that same year we would have the 2008 financial crisis, you know, and then also in 2025 vision, there was a leadership crisis and some other issues that were going on. So there are always kind of forces pushing in and on us from the outside, and it's not just what we do from the inside. So what I was trying to do is just try to help introduce leaders to the tools of strategic foresight, so they begin to think in terms of multiple possible futures instead of picking one or trying to use inside information, but learning to kind of scan the horizon and look for the opportunities and look for the drivers of change that could affect the future.
Right. And we've reached a watermark in this season at 100 years of the cooperative program. And it's been amazing to go through this process with you. And I have learned so much. So I'm really excited to hear you just talk about the process. What is the Future Commission 2050 and why does it matter?
So the Future Commission is sort of an idea I got, and then it kind of drove me to back to school, and I went through the Doctor of Ministry program at Southwestern and made it my topic of study. And if you recall, like this year, we're looking at the history of the Cooperative Program, the centennial
Right.
at the annual meeting. There was a group called the Future Program Commission that developed the recommendations that were accepted and approved and became what we know now today as the Cooperative Program. And so kind of as an homage to that, I just wanted to create the Future Commission. And instead of, just proposing, a certain strategy, proposing the possibilities and starting the conversation about where the Cooperative Program could go. So that's the significance of it. The fruit of my doctoral research, there are about 20 plus leaders who volunteered to work with me throughout this process to learn how to use strategic foresight and horizon scanning, trend spotting, and scenario building.
Yeah.
At the same time, we also surveyed across the SBC pastors and asked them to kind of share what they thought were the external and internal drivers impacting the future of the Cooperative Program, the social, technological, economic, environmental, political, legal, educational, and spiritual aspects. A lot of people think about the future, but not very many people have a process for analyzing and looking for the signals of the future. So that's what the Future Commission did. We try to use that and then develop scenario planning. It's a very useful tool. It's kind of unusual in that it's different than scenario planning. It's really scenario strategic thinking. And so strategic thinking uses a lot of imagination. And we use our imagination in strategic planning all the time, usually in isolation. This is more in a collaboration. And then each of the scenarios is like an exercise in creativity and thought so that we can collaborate together to imagine a different world. And in the business world, they use scenarios. In the military, they call them war games.
Right.
And or some kids today might call it role playing. But what we do is we just kind of use the different scenarios, we live in them and imagine how things, could happen, and and then kind of react to the possibilities that we might have.
Yeah. Let's take a look at some of those drivers of change, and you've got them up here on the screen. I was wondering if you could just unpack those for us.
Sure. So the kind of the foundational tools you use for developing scenarios are drivers, and drivers aren't just picked out of thin air. they're developed through systematic scanning of the horizon. So we first look for signals, individual isolated bursts on the radar of of things that are happening around us, and then invariably there will be a repetition or similar events happening. And so what happens is we move from strategic signals to spotting constellations of these signals that kind of make sense together. So they are trends, and trends are visible today. They're not always widely dispersed, but they start having an influence. But as trends move together, they form drivers. And drivers are kind of a galaxy of these constellations of signals that we use to navigate, very much like a sailor might use to navigate where we are, the different constellations, the drivers to help us kind of map the future. And we've isolated through the work of the Future Commission and that survey by pastors, all those signals, and we group them into drivers and rank them according to uh, plausibility and impact. How likely they could impact us, how much impact they could have. Probability and impact is probably a better way to say it. And then we rank them according to.
Let's give our viewers a practical example, something that maybe we have all experienced, which is maybe a pandemic. So what were some of the signals there?
Okay, looking back at the pandemic, that's more of a wild card than a signal or a driver, but the probability of it happening was considered low, but it was a possibility. It was a plausible possibility that we could have pandemic.
So that was more like a wild card than an actual signal.
Yeah, like a signal. And so we use those wild cards to we monitor those. Those are high impact, low probability, and even today, we could have another pandemic happen, or something that we don't want or anticipate, like a military conflict or a cyber attack or something like that. High impact. Not really sure about the probability right now. That's to be watched. A better signal might be some of the social signals that we can see. Like one of the bigger drivers is the demographic shifts that are shaping the future of the Cooperative Program. First, we have the retirement by 2030, pretty much the complete retirement of the baby boomers. That doesn't mean they're leaving the scene. They're going to still be around as in retirement. It's still important in our churches, but there's a transition of leadership from the boomer to the Generation X, and that Generation X has been sending signals all along their entire ministry that transparency and accountability are very highly important to them. Not that they weren't important to the baby boomers, but they were expressed with a little bit more trust in institutions than exist among Generation X and the younger generation. So those things have impacted trust in the SBC. They've impacted a desire to see more accountability, and technology has driven that even more so, where people expect more accountability, instant kind of accountability. Also, technology shifts. So, like, if I were to look at the biggest drivers, and you can kind of think through these with me. First of all, big when you think about the Cooperative Program is economic issues.
Right.
The Cooperative Program, it might have more or less money, but that money doesn't go as far as it used to. So if you have, $100 million going to the International Mission Board, approximately, the spending power of that dollar changes based on inflation rates. Also, in economic donor fatigue, there's a constant drum, not just from us, but from other entities. Probably about 80% of evangelical ministry is funded through Southern Baptists
Right.
giving to different causes. And then those changing behaviors about money and spending, a technological evolution. Like right now, we're using technology to communicate from, you're in Tennessee and I'm in
Right.
Oklahoma. During the pandemic, it became, very important. Even some of the most rural churches shifted their paradigm from in person to online and from physical checks to online giving.
Yeah.
That was quite a jump, and it has continued to shape things. Educational disrupt how people are learning and what people want. Students aren't necessarily growing up in Christian homes, uh, trained by Sunday school materials that they read from Lifeway. So they're not necessarily all in the pipeline to become leaders, to become part of our seminary enrollment. So seminary enrollments impacted our leadership pipeline in general is affected by that. There's a whole generation of Gen Z that have a whole lot of them who just have no interest in getting a college degree. They want to learn the trades, and thankful that's good because that's valuable. And we need more people getting into the trades to fix our everything that we're, well, so they just want those professional certifications. They don't want student loans. They don't want all those issues. And so that, educational is changing not only what students are, but what the instructors are. So the next generation will have high interaction with AI, have high interaction with other forms of technology, robots and autonomous vehicles and things like that. So,
And Chris, it seems like the change has just been, it's overwhelming. I mean, the amount of change that we've experienced just over the past 2 years.
yeah, and the military, getting back to the military, they have a term called VUCA, which is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And we're kind of in the heart of that.
Right.
We're definitely in that moment of complexity. And these issues kind of all combine, they're drivers, they're the galaxies, but there's also a kind of a spiritual malaise, and that spiritual malaise expresses itself in um, people creating their own faith path that is not based on the doctrines of God. That
You
is
kind of
just
describe it as a doctrinal fog.
yeah, it's just the people are unclear. There's also a lot of fragmentation, even within the SBC, over different approaches to soteriology. It's always been an issue, even back in 1925, it was an issue.
Right.
But we see it there, and then also um, roles and in leadership in the church are also part of that. I would say the spiritual malaise also is just kind of like that turning away. It's kind of a partner of that radical individualism
Yeah.
that people kind of are creating their own religions. They are like
They're definitely deconstructing.
yeah, exactly. And this meta-modern spirituality that kind of blends paradoxes to create their own experience. A lot of young people create their spiritual beliefs not only from scripture, but also from, science fiction or Marvel or, other, kind of, movies or other kind of media and stuff like that. But I have a hopeful note on that because in times of when there was great spiritual malaise in the past, it always preceded an awakening, a
Yeah.
spiritual awakening. So, like maybe I would want to interpret it in a little different way and say, like, what maybe there is a possibility that this spiritual malaise is a part of the beginning of the unraveling of individualized spirituality.
I love it.
Signs of that, young people moving toward even like liturgical things and Book of Common Prayer and other, embodied spiritual expression, so that, they're moving in a direction of spirituality. And this is an opportunity moment too for us. I mentioned earlier the institutional distrust, that the confidence that people don't have, they don't have confidence as much as they used to in the SBC.
Right.
They don't have confidence in institutions that are not in the SBC.
Yeah.
They don't have confidence in institutions. And you see that polarization, that polarization that you see in the general marketplace, that distrust of institutions and that demand for clarity, that kind of that Doge, Department of Government Efficiency kind of mindset is, also present in our context.
Right.
And so that fragmentation is something that is a natural part of the kind of the cycles of life, so to speak. And I think that, that's why I look at it a hopeful way, because those kind of the fragmentation and the rigidity that you see in institutions resisting, you see the breakdown of even the progressive narratives that, are seen around us. You see institutions responding to each other. And it's a very precarious moment for us, because it could go either way.
Right.
And so this is a good time for Christians to express unity and to lead in Christ-like ways, Christ-like character, love for each other.
Right.
So those drivers, we prioritize them and rank them by probability and impact, and also on the timeline called the 3 horizons. So the 3 horizons are, the first horizon is kind of the current situation. Anytime you talk about the Cooperative Program, you really are talking about talking about it on one of these horizons. So the first horizon would be kind of the situation where the current situation is losing its strategic fit, and it is kind of moving toward dissipation and decline. Then you have that second tier, that second horizon, where that's the point where experimentation is happening, and where people are trying to innovate and trying to respond to the H1 decline. That's the horizon 2. It is probably, I would push it out there kind of beyond 2030. So we're kind of in H1 and then H2, and then beyond 2030, 2040 and so forth would be like the early stages of something, the really weak signals. So it would like to propose an idea that might seem really weird right now, is the use of blockchain in our everyday life. In 2040, it will probably be more commonplace.
Right.
It may be that we use blockchain for, credentials to vote within the SBC. It could be that we use it for funding, because all that money is decentralized and able to go to its right spot. Blockchain, Bitcoin, these other kinds of things, not necessarily Bitcoin, the brand, but the idea of blockchain currencies, decentralized currencies. Those are weird. Those are out there. They're not happening now, but there are things that could happen, and they kind of form that third horizon. So by taking these drivers and then placing them on the horizons, looking at them, we develop the signals. We develop the drivers, which we use as fodder or material for building our future scenarios.
Right. So let me just ask you this, for leaders who aren't familiar with futures thinking, how would you explain that?
So futures thinking is more, it's not predicting the future. It's not prophecy or anything like that. It's more of a creative time to kind of explore possibilities and what might be ahead. So, for example, we can have a conversation about blockchain today.
Right.
And, we're out there. No one's doing a blockchain program or anything that I know of anyway. But we probably will be talking about blockchain and robotics and these other issues. AI is on this current horizon, and it's really emerging on the second horizon of, kind of like it will be really prominent probably 2030 and beyond. So um, just kind of looking at what's changing and not being taken by surprise. And it's to lead proactively and not reactively, not just like wait until, you know, a financial issue interrupts our plans, or
Right.
technology issue like Y2K. Uh,
And
also,
you've said it's really a form of stewardship.
yeah, one thing, we have so much information coming at us all the time, and we have access, unprecedented amount of knowledge. I mean, even with this AI, it has increased exponentially in just like the last couple of 3 years. So, how are we going to steward what we have? Making most of the time, as Paul would say, because the days are evil. What are we doing to be like the ant who prepares for the future? When the proverb says, "Consider the ant, you sluggard," he was really talking to Generation X.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just kidding. I'm one myself. So, but it's a proactive form of leadership, and it is increasingly used in business and government and military and these other applications. So my hope is to bring foresight literacy to Southern Baptist leaders, or pastors, ministry leaders, associational missionaries, state convention leaders, and not just talk about the future of the corporate program, but the future of leadership, the future of education, the future
Yeah.
of so many topics that we are facing together.
Well, you do a great job in the book, helping pastors and other leaders get their arms around future thinking. What can pastors and churches do with the book in a practical sense?
Well, first of all, the book has points. One point of purpose is to explore the future of the cooperative program, and it can be used as a case study for leaders to learn foresight. But it also introduces you to many of the tools of strategic foresight that I use in my Insight Futures Labs. I call them Insight Futures Labs because we're trying to insight or provoke a conversation about the future. And so that's one thing you can do. Start talking about the future. Like, for example, there in the book, throughout the book, there are kind of in your church kind of context ways to apply strategic foresight. And, in the local church context, one thing could be just to use the book chapter by chapter once a week and talk about it, because we talk about, the principles in the Bible that are behind the cooperative program is intercongregational financial cooperation that is modeled by Paul. So there's the biblical issues. There's the tools of foresight, the 3 horizons, the horizon scanning. We outline a number of categories from the social, technological, educational, environmental, political, legal. I call them steeples.
Yeah.
Steeples category. So as you look at the steeples categories, those things are impacting the local church as much. Demographics are impacting the local church. Sometimes you look at a local church and they start to decline, and they're really good. They're really good at what they do. Operationally, they're spot on, but externally, the neighborhood's changed, and it's continuing to change. The signals were there; they just overlooked them, and
Right.
one by one, things started changing. So it's a good way to use it as kind of a case study and apply it in your context. Now, foresight can be used for any topic that has to do with the future. And people say, "I don't want to be a futurist." Well, if you do any kind of planning, all planning is future oriented.
Right.
It can totally inform, but I think forward thinking. Christ said, "Don't worry about the future," but he didn't say don't think about the future. It's okay to think about the future. And also, the Bible's very forward looking. It looks forward to a day when all around the throne was every people, tribe, tongue, worshiping the Lord. And so we've been given our marching orders to think in the future, to think toward the future. And so that's a good way, I think, an application for it.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people, when they first think Project 2050, and they're saying, "Gosh, I'm not even going to be around. Why should that concern me?"
Yeah, and in 2050 I'll be 87, so hopefully I'll be watching and paying attention to what's going on, eating a lot of oatmeal as well, probably. But uh, there's this kind of concept. I read a book called the Good Ancestor, and it's a secular book. It's probably written for different purposes than than a Christian book would be written, but the concept of being a good ancestor is to have cathedral thinking. And you think of the people who built the cathedrals,
Right.
or even Solomon building the temple, uh, building something and preserving something that outlasts you. Planting a tree and you'll never see the shade.
Right.
And that goes back to 1925 when the Cooperative Program was formed. That's a very innovative strategic move that they made. And even people in that moment weren't really aware of what was going on. They were overly focused on just the controversies of the day, like the Scopes monkey trial. But if we could be a part of being a good ancestor and build a lasting future for the Cooperative Program, I would be so proud of this future commission team that pulled together.
Yeah, when we think about 1925, there are a lot of connections that we have now, right? You mentioned that in your writing.
Exactly. And I'm actually thinking about my next book about the threshold of the remnant Renaissance is kind of the working title. But the idea is that there are cycles where things kind of repeat, just like generationally, you can look at, when I'm 87, I'll be doing 87-year-old things. When I was, in my 20s, I was thinking, or a teenager, I was thinking like a teenager. We all
Right.
see kind of patterns that my kids repeat and others repeat. There are repeating patterns. That doesn't mean they're uh, locked in, set cyclical time. Time is linear, but there are kind of seasons. And so, like, I feel like the season that we're in is very similar to the season that produced the Cooperative Program.
Right.
And the generation that's coming up into leadership, Millennial, Gen Z, are far more open to a new civic order and more willing to be more collaborative. They already are very collaborative in their use of online tools, social media. They're also very interested in integrity and transparency. We take those scenarios, those drivers, and we built them. And I don't want to unpack the scenarios because I want you really to kind of read through. But in Foresight, you develop scenarios. You kind of have a default kind of set archetypes of futures that you kind of build. And that keeps you honest because you might be tempted to only tell a rosy picture.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a probable baseline future in there. We have a collapse future, where things come apart, and all foresight should have, at least those projected, and then a collapse. Then there's also a transformative future. And then out of the conversation that the Future Commission had, we developed a preferred future, and then we kind of gave some steps to it. One thing that we found, give away too much, but the probable future and the collapsed future looked uncomfortably close to each other.
Yeah. Right.
And so that kind of underscores the urgency of, kind of a reevaluation and looking at the future, the transformative sense. But the preferred future really offers some steps out. We actually go out to 2050 and kind of work our way backward to show what we would do to get to that preferred future. That's in there. Whether you agree with it or not, or you don't even have to agree with any of the scenarios. The whole point of it is imagination. Jane McGonigal, a futurist, says the purpose of the future is not predict it. Though what's good about the future is not to predict it, but to it's for creativity.
Mm.
And so we use these creatively. So the scenarios are creative tools. The preferred future is one of the scenarios. It's a preferred tool, but somewhere along the line, it'll spark something new for us as Southern Baptists and for your church in general. And also, as you know, even on yourself, on your personal life, where God might be leading you, it helps you
Right.
kind of, consider different possibilities.
Well, I know one thing that gets Chris Forbes emotional is Cooperative Program. Whenever you talk about it, it's obvious. What's some of your hopes?
The future that I'm hoping for is one where we shift the Cooperative Program away from being a part of a fundraising strategy to becoming a part of our spiritual formation. It's what makes us who we are as Christians. We worship, we give, we partner. Whenever the Apostle Paul used terms related to giving, he used terms like partnership, fellowship, grace, and then underscored that their gifts, their faithfulness, their partnership, their fellowship would cause other people to worship God. And so ultimately, our work with the Cooperative Program is aimed at a future where we view it as part of our worship, not a worship of our institutions. Nobody's perfect. We never will get to that place where we're perfect. But our Lord is perfect, and He's worthy of all of ours. And, Paul used kind of the metaphor of manna in the Bible, where he referred to, he who didn't have too much. The idea, he was recalling back to that manna, where you can save manna. You can't hoard it. You need to, it's not going to be there tomorrow, so you need to share it with those who don't have it. And so our gifts, what God has given us as Southern Baptists, getting back to our stewardship, is not to be hoarded for ourselves, not to be used to build our own personal platform or even and the aggrandizement of Southern Baptist Convention, but for the worship and glory of God.
So this book is coming out, and tell us a little bit more about how we can get our hands on it.
Okay, well, the book is called The Next Era of the Cooperative Program, and you'll be able to get it on Amazon and download it in ebook or print. And God willing, if we can get that audible version of it up there too. So starting in June, my goal is that the book will be available by the SBC annual meeting. Not that I expect any particular attention, but just that it's kind of seemed like a good time to launch the book. So, and looking back, it's the culmination of all my doctoral work, but not just me. It's those 20 leaders who come from across the SBC who had a Cooperative Program as a significant part of their job assignments. It's pastors from across the SBC.
Right.
And even back to research I did in 2008 with some of the younger generation, Gen X. So it is a culmination of more than just my opinions. But ultimately, it could only serve as a tool for your imagination and for your consideration. And so, I hope that you will take it, read it, and that it will it'll incite a conversation about the future of the Cooperative Program.
That's great. Flux capacitor not included.
Yeah, exactly. No time travel needed.
All right. It's great to talk to you, Chris. Just want to encourage everybody to get a copy of the book, whether you're on Kindle or print or whatever. And then as we move along, if you have any questions, you're seeing on the screen Chris Forbes' information about how you can get in contact with him to talk some more about the future